Hey everyone, it's Triple Mango Threat or Ashley, and today we're talking about the Nitpicking Nerds budget deck, so let's jump right into it. Our commanders are Siani and Eligeth. Whenever Siani attacks, we get to scry X, where X is the number of attacking creatures with flying, and it's partnered with Eligeth, which whenever we scry a number of cards, we actually draw that many instead. These are both flying, and they can pack a punch because a lot of the times our opponents are not going to have flying creatures to block with. But let's talk about the silly ways we get to draw cards, because with Eligeth, instead of scrying, we get to draw. So Mystic Speculation, this is a 1 blue sorcery where we have buyback 2, which means we can pay an additional 2 to return it to our hand. We get to scry 3, which we actually draw 3 for 1 blue, which is an Ancestral Recall, which is banned in Commander. It's also a lot more money than Mystic Speculation. Same thing with Preordain. We pay 1 blue, it's a sorcery, we scry 2, then draw a card. Or really, draw 2, then draw another, so draw 3 for 1 blue. And the last awesome card is Serum Visions. For 1 blue, we draw a card, then scry 2. Still sorcery speed, but we're drawing 3 with our Commander. Talking about more cards that cost 1 blue, we have Witching Well, Fairy Seer, and Silent Raven. When these enter the battlefield, we get to scry, which means for 1 blue, we can get a creature or an artifact, and also draw a card. These are awesome in the deck because the 2 creatures I just mentioned, they have flying, and that can trigger Siani, drawing us more cards instead of scrying. Moving on to the 2 mana cost draw spells that I really want to mention, we have Augury Owl. It's a 1/1 bird that has flying. When it enters the battlefield, we scry 3, or draw 3. Let's talk about Deliberate. It is an instant that costs 1 and a blue. We get to scry 2, then draw a card, or draw 3 for 2, which we can cast it on someone's turn before ours. Moving on to the 4 mana cost, let's talk about Cryptic Annelid. This is a 1/4 worm beast. When it enters the battlefield, we scry 1, then scry 2, then scry 3. So with our commander Eligeth, we get to draw 6 cards when this enters the battlefield. Another card I really like is Netherese Puzzle Ward. For 3 and a blue, we have an enchantment that has Focus Beam. At the beginning of our upkeep, roll a d4, scry X, where X is the result. And then it has Perfect Illumination. Whenever we roll the highest die for its natural result, we get to draw a card. So potentially, we can draw 5 cards off of this one at our upkeep. We're always going to be able to draw 1 card off of this, and that is really sweet. And the last card I want to mention is Zhalfirin Void. This is a land that when it enters the battlefield, we get to scry 1, and it just taps for a colorless. So when this enters the battlefield, we'll just draw a card, which is really nice. Now moving on to the ways we can actually keep all of those cards in our hand, we have Thought Vessel and Reliquary Tower. This gives us no maximum hand size, and they also tap for a colorless. Having no maximum hand size is really important for this deck because we are drawing so many cards, we're going to have to discard a lot of them at our end step. Moving on to the ways we ramp in this deck, there is a lot. Starting with Soul Ring, we can pay 1, tap it for 2, and then moving on to the 2 mana cost mana rocks, we have Liquid Metal Torque, Guardian Idol, and Mind Stone. We can tap these for a colorless, and these also have additional abilities that we could use. The last 2 mana costs I want to talk about is Arcane Signet and Prismatic Lens. If we really need a colored mana, Prismatic Lens is going to be there to help us. We just have to pay 1 and tap it, or originally we can just tap it for a colorless. Arcane Signet can tap for any color of our commander's identity, which is going to be blue. And then we have Seer's Lantern. We can tap it for a colorless, or we can pay 2, tap it, and then we get to scry 1, or we draw 1. And I like the versatility there. Continuing on, we have Solemn Simulacrum. When it enters the battlefield, we get to search for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and when it dies, we get to draw a card. Warden of Evos Isle. This is going to make it where our flying creatures cost 1 less to cast, and we have a lot of flying creatures in the deck, so this is perfect. We have Burnished Heart that costs 3, and then we can later pay 3 to sacrifice it and get 2 basics on the battlefield tap. There's also Wayfarer's Bauble for 1, and we can pay 2 to sacrifice it and search our library for a basic land and put that on the battlefield tapped. We have Ornithopter of Paradise, which is an underrated card in my opinion, and I'm glad they put this one in here. It costs 2, we tap it for any color of mana, and it's a 0/2 flyer. And then the last card I want to talk about is Myriad Landscape. This enters the battlefield tapped. It can tap for a colorless, or later we can pay 2, tap it, sacrifice it, and get 2 basics of the same type onto the battlefield. So 2 islands for 2 mana. Moving on to the ways we protect our commanders, let's talk about Essior Wardwing Familiar and Swiftfoot Boots. This is a 1/3 flyer, and spells your opponents cast that target 1 or more commanders you control cost 3 more to cast. There's also Swiftfoot Boots, a very popular commander card. We can equip it to a creature, and it now has hexproof and haste. So it's going to make it a little bit harder for our opponents to target our commander. The problem is these are the only 2 ways we can protect our commanders, but I think it's made up for with this next category. There are 16 removal spells in this deck. 7 of them are counter spells, so let's start with those. Jwari Disruption for 1 and a blue. It's an instant. You can counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. Mystic Confluence. I like this one because we can choose 3 of these, and we can choose them more than once. We can counter target spell unless its controller pays 3, return a creature to its owner's hand, or draw a card. We have Arcane Denial. We can counter a spell, and then its controller can draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next upkeep, and we get to draw a card at the next upkeep. Siren Storm Tamer. We can sacrifice it to counter a spell or ability that targets you or a creature you control control. We also have foil. We can discard an island rather than pay this cost, and we can counter a spell. Next we have dissolve, which lets us counter target spell, and then we get to scry one or draw one. And then we have disdainful stroke. We can counter a spell with converted mana cost 4 or greater. This deck does a great job of dealing with creatures, so we have reality shift, resculpt, and raven form. We can exile an artifact or a creature, or specifically a creature with reality shift, and they get a token instead of the creature they had. These are awesome, and raven form has foretell, which we can cast it for only 1 mana later if we wait till our next turn. Curse of the Swine is another great one. We get to exile X creatures, and for each creature exiled this way, they get a 2/2 boar on the battlefield. Rapid hybridization for 1 blue, and then we have Pongify for also another blue. These are both instants, and they can destroy target creature. They can't be regenerated, and its controller gets a 3/3. Specifically a frog lizard for a rapid hybridization, and an ape token. And then we have Imprisoned in the Moon for 2 and a blue. We can enchant a creature, land, or planeswalker. The enchanted permanent is now a colorless land with tap to add colorless, and it loses all other card types and abilities. This is a great way to take care of our opponent's commander, land, or planeswalker. The last 2 cards in the removal category, we have Nimble, Obstructionist, and Misdirection. Whenever we cycle Nimble Obstructionist, we can counter target activated or triggered ability we don't control. And Misdirection is nice because we can exile another blue card from our hand to pay for the mana cost of this card. And then we can change the target of a spell with a single target. Moving on to the board wipes of the deck, we have Spectral Deluge and Engulf the Shore. We can return each creature our opponents control with toughness X or less to its owner's hand, where X is the number of islands you control. We can also pay it for 1 blue for its foretell cost, as long as we don't cast it on the turn we foretell it. And then we have Engulf the Shore. Return to their owner's hands all creatures with toughness less than or equal to the number of islands you control. And since we're a mono blue deck, these board wipes are going to do great. So how do we win with this deck? Well, there's 3 ways to do so. We have Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, Triskaidekaphile, and Adamus All-Seeing. Jace, Wielder of Mysteries lets us draw a card from our library whenever we had no cards left. We would actually win the game instead. Triskaidekaphile makes it where we have no maximum hand size, and at the beginning of our upkeep, if we have exactly 13 cards in our hand, we win the game. It's also a 1/3 creature, and for 3 and a blue, we can draw a card. Adamus All-Seeing costs 3 and 3 blue. It's a Sphinx. That's a 4/5 flyer. We can pay 2 and a blue, tap it to draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Whenever this deals damage to an opponent, you may reveal your hand. If it has at least 6 different converted mana costs revealed this way, that player loses the game. So if this is a 1v1, this is another way for us to win. And the last card I want to talk about is Psychosis Crawler. Since we're drawing so many cards, this is going to have us deal a lot of damage to our opponents. And it may not seem like a lot, but for each card we're drawing, we get to deal them 1. And it's also equal to the number of cards in our hand, which can be a lot when we have no maximum hand size. Overall, I really enjoyed the deck, and you may also enjoy this type of deck if you like to draw cards, have win conditions besides combat with flying creatures, and you like to take advantage of scrying. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to see more of these types of videos, you can become a patron down below. It helps make more of these videos, and I get to do it once each month, so that is a ton of fun. Also, what is the next deck you want to see on this series? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.